Hello, it is nice to have you here. Let's get ready for the upcoming expansion with this quick tier list discussion. The new Dawn of the Hunt expansion brings a breath of fresh air to the path of Exile 2. You will now have to rediscover the game from the start once again, as apparently every single aspect of the game received a minor or major balance change. There is only one sure way to do that, by experiencing it yourself. Obviously, not everything has changed. The core principles of the game are still here. You are supposed to hunt a lot of monsters, receive valuable loot, and have fun. You just shouldn't judge the new version by the old standards. Teleporting around and exploding packs of monsters on sight is probably not the intended vision here. Unsurprisingly, most of the upcoming tuning changes are nerfs to overperforming skills. Some of them are well deserved, some are questionable at best. Obviously, it is never fun to have your favorite playstyle weakened, but it is also a great motivation to pursue new archetypes. Each character is built on 3 main foundations: skills they use, items they wear, and ascendancy they choose. In this tier list, we want to discuss the last part, gauging the power of all the ascendancies in the light of the freshly announced changes. A suitable ascendancy is probably the most important factor that shapes your overall build, especially in the early stages of the game. Let's start with the most interesting part, the new ascendancies. The Amazon is probably the new go-to pick for any attack build, as the critical strike notable is simply too good. Critical strikes are the easiest way to scale your damage for most builds, even the ones that rely on damaging ailments. The elemental infusion is undoubtedly very strong for the new spear archetype, but other attacks can greatly benefit from the generic damage bonus against enemies with open weakness. It does not provide defense, but opens up interesting opportunities for unusual setups, with the Stalking Panther notable, and the Elemental Leech or Double Flasks provide great recovery. The Lich is a powerful option for any spellcaster or summoner. It strongly favors hybrid builds that utilize both maximum life and energy shield. The defensive capabilities are not as strong as predicted initially, but still higher than most other ascendancies anyway. Additionally, you will probably want to use a defensive curse with the Blasphemy Aura to enable the Chaos Explosions for a massive boost to clear speed. The scalable Unholy Might buff is also a great, especially for Chaos builds to fully elevate bonuses from the Wither debuff. In later stages, you will be able to use the original Sin Ring to unlock all elemental skills as well. It is not a league starting option obviously, but definitely not as excessive as its precursor in Path of Exile 1. If you want to focus on defense, look no further than the Smith of Kitava. This embodiment of defense will allow you to easily reach 90% maximum resistance against all elemental types and apply it partially to the physical damage. It will greatly reduce any need for elemental resistance on your gear, allowing you to pick up more damage there instead. It is great for typical warrior builds, but not limited to them. The position on the passive tree might seem unfavorable, but this can be fixed with a new unique helmet that makes enemies count as having low life status and stacking bonuses against such enemies. The Tactician is another interesting option. It is not as good at raw damage reduction like the Smith of Kitava, but provides a very valuable stun and ailment thresholds. Losing the control of your character is both deadly and frustrating, so this node alone might prompt you for this ascendancy if you primarily look for a comfortable mapper. The ability to pin with all damage types and enhancing it to block all actions is also great for general mapping. It won't be that great against bosses, as the build-up takes a bit of time. This ascendancy is however more restrictive for scaling damage, as you still need to cover your base defenses and resistances. It is a mixed bag of projectiles, totems, and minions. It is a safe pick for decent results, but it might not excel at everything. The Ritualist has only 2 good aspects. An extra ring and the effectiveness of jewelry is a decent option to scale your damage if your gear is good enough, but it is not really exciting or build enabling, especially with the new state of the Ingenuity belt. The other, arguably more characteristic aspect is the Blood Ritual. Without the animation time, this ascendancy would be the top pick for any map-focused player imitating the famous Headhunter belt. The reality is, the cooldown, animation time, and short duration of the buffs granted by Ritual are simply too annoying to play around in the long run. The other notables are rather weak. The extra charms are decent, but not at the high cost of 4 ascendancy points. And the Blood Boil skill seems very bland, barely adding any impact to your usual gameplay. Most of the older ascendancies also received some changes. Surprisingly, the Deadeye received a buff for frenzy interactions and nothing else. It is still the best choice for fast clear speed, thanks to the Tailwind buff, which also offers decent damage reduction for evasive builds. Bows are still fundamentally one of the best skills for clear speed. The lightning rod interactions will no longer instantly delete bosses in a few seconds, but the intended combo with magnetic salvo is still very strong. Of course, this ascendancy can be used for many other archetypes. The hot topic, the spears, will also work greatly with this ascendancy. Tailwind, extra damage with projectiles against distant enemies, and a decent chance to generate maximum charges at once will work greatly here. Spears don't scale with extra frenzy charges, but generating them more reliably will increase your overall DPS. The Pathfinder is the best choice for anything related to poison due to the doubled amount of stacks you can reach. Additionally, the Contagious Contamination is the only way to spread poisons applied by spells, as the Herald requires a martial weapon now. The poison is not the only theme of this ascendancy. The new notables provide a unique way to get immunity against elemental ailments, and you will be able to use evasion rating as a way to mitigate elemental damage. It will be especially powerful for builds that stack a lot of evasion for the Queen of the Forest armor, or potentially some new unique items like the Dream Feather from the Path of Exile 1. That said, the Concoction playstyle is most likely not a viable choice now, although there is a slight possibility it will be tuned to work well on its own without abusing the Widowhail scaling, which was not intended way of using this skill apparently. The Invoker is the best pick for anything involving quarterstaves. Ignoring elemental resistances with critical strikes is a massive help with damage consistency, especially against bosses and rare enemies with extra resistance. The nerf to Tempest Bell shouldn't be too surprising, considering it was used by almost 25% of high-level players to instantly burst down bosses. It is still an insanely powerful ability that pairs well with the Invoker's avatar, which grants you a short boost to damage. Furthermore, the Meditate ability now gained a lot of defensive value, as you can no longer use the Grim Feast skill to overflow your energy shield. It will continue to be one of the best archetypes in the game so far, both in terms of performance and gameplay enjoyment. On the other hand, the Acolyte of Chayula is not in the great spot. The darkness mechanic continues to disappoint, as the spirit skills are too valuable to give up. However, the leech side received a substantial buff. You will be able to leech mana with all damage types, and it will also recover your energy shield. It is a huge defensive buff that might make this ascendancy much more popular in later stages of the game. Unfortunately, leech requires solid amounts of damage to be effective, and you will need to source it from good items, as the offensive bonuses of Acolyte are not great. The lack of good chaos-based attack skills greatly holds back this ascendancy as well. The Blood Mage fulfills a specific niche for critical strike spells. It is now extended to include bleeding skills. As with the new Blood Barbs notable, you can inflict aggravated bleeds on cursed enemies. The popularity of this ascendancy will heavily depend on the new tools brought in this update for the bleed archetype, which seems to be rather plentiful. Unlike Path of Exile 1, bleed and critical strikes pair quite well thanks to the higher hit damage and bonuses that grant more magnitude of ailments inflicted by critical strikes. The life cost of skills is problematic and requires some effort to be fixed, usually with a pair of Atzeria Acuity gloves that grant you instant leech. This makes the leveling process rather daunting, so we can't recommend this ascendancy for your league start. The Infernalist received major changes, but most of them are not good. The initial start with this ascendancy will be much better, but the end game potential is much lower. The demon form now drains a flat amount of life per second, so sustaining higher amounts of demon flames will be much harder. It, however, doesn't lock you to a certain set of unique items like before, opening new opportunities for more interesting builds in the future. The spell damage bonus caps at 10 stacks by default now, which is equivalent to a good caster weapon. It saves you plenty of currency, but you will need to spend it on gear with life regeneration. The good change is that Infernal Flame depletes very fast now, which changes your approach to the mana sustain. It is a non-trivial issue for most spell builds, especially as Archmage is not as attractive option to scale your damage anymore. It is great ascendancy for the early and mid game, but the end game viability remains a mystery. Unfortunately, it is still not the time to shine for the Chronomancer ascendancy. It is definitely not bad, but could have been better. Slowing down or stopping in time your enemies is a massive boost for your survivability, and reversing your life and energy shield to previous values can definitely save you in some situations. However, it is hard to keep track of your older afterimages in the chaotic nature of the gameplay, so it can be just as deadly as it is helpful. The other feature of this Ascendancy is resetting or bypassing the cooldown of our skills. Currently, there are no good skills to make use of it properly, as even the Hammer of the Gods no longer has a cooldown now. The saving grace might be the new Flame Blast, or the Unleash skill, which is not an ideal situation for the league start. The rotational cast speed buff is decent, but hardly a reason to pick the Chronomancer over anything else. The Stormweaver received some serious nerfs, but it is still a very good Ascendancy for elemental casters. It is also the easiest one to plug and play. You don't really need to worry about some gimmicks or downsides. Extra shock with any damage type or extra chill, also with any damage type, are always useful to have. Your exposure now takes away only 12% elemental resistance, but it still scales with exposure effects. Scaling Arcane Surge with mana is probably not the right move now, although the baseline effect is still decent. Alternatively, the Elemental Storms add a decent amount of clear speed and damage if you have a moderate chance to critically strike. The Witch Hunter was already a good Ascendancy, but it received a decent boost to your damage against enemies with broken concentration, and the Sorcery Ward applies a lesser penalty to your evasion and armor rating. Arguably, the biggest advantage of the Witch Hunter is the chance to explode enemies on kill, which is now much more valuable, as you can no longer use Herald skills to explode entire hordes of enemies at once. This Ascendancy does not really have a theme. The bonuses are generic enough to apply to almost all playstyles. It will not excel at anything in particular, but will be good enough to have a fair share of fun with it. At the highest level of gear, the attribute stacking Gemling Legionnaire with Hands of Wisdom and Action is probably still the top build you can create. It is obviously gated behind absurdly expensive items, so you probably shouldn't worry about it too much, as even before the changes the Gemling required a high budget to overperform other Ascendancies. It is a very specific Ascendancy that works only in particular setups. We will definitely see some crazy setups with new unique items, especially as most of them are targeted for the endgame, but it is too early to recommend this Ascendancy. The Warbringer received two very impactful changes that bring this Ascendancy to the top for physical attack builds. The reworked Jade skill now simply grants you guard based on your maximum life, making it a very good source of damage absorption that pairs well with block. Another change that is easy to miss is that broken armor now causes enemies to take 20% increased physical damage. It will work very well with the Warbringer's ability to break armor with all hits for consistent damage boost. Thanks to the Giant's Blood Keystone, you can use shield together with a two-handed weapon, and this Ascendancy excels at boosting your block chance. The Turtle Charm is a block version of the Acrobatic Keystone, which is for many considered a mandatory keystone for any evasion build. It allows you to block area attacks and spells, which are usually the most dangerous. Overall, this Ascendancy might not be as durable as Smith of the Kitava, but requires much lower investments to reach comfortable levels of defense and offense. The Titan is also a simply good Ascendancy. With the hulking form that increases the effect of small passive skills, it is probably the most versatile Ascendancy in the game. It is especially good for duration-based skills, as those modifiers are extremely scarce. Of course, its primary use is also good. It offers a lot of damage for a typical warrior build, and might be the only Ascendancy that can reliably use Hammer of the Gods due to the heavy stun requirement. It is still by far the strongest ability in the game, so locking it behind a specific setup might be justifiable. The extra inventory space is not particularly great, as it mostly exists as additional cost for the hulking form notable, but you will definitely miss it while playing any other Ascendancy. There are many builds that are no longer playable on a fundamental level, such as the Energy Invocation Infernalist, or any build that used the Trample Toe unique to proliferate the overkill damage with Frost Walls. Some are still well functional, just not on a power level that would discourage you from playing other builds. Remember, it is still a beta for the full game. We will see many more absurdly powerful builds, some of which will be playable only once in a lifetime. As always, we will continue to explore and test various builds to create the best build guides for you to enjoy, fully explaining their mechanics and interactions so you never miss the new hot topics. We hope this tier list will help you to decide which Ascendancy you will want to try out first in the new expansion. Thanks you for watching, and see you in the next video.